What happens when the nation's most beloved action hero walks into a studio expecting warmth and applause, but instead finds himself ambushed on live television? What starts as a routine promotional interview quickly devolves into a brutal, bare-knuckle psychological war, one that no publicist can spin and electrocrypts through the screen. This is not a movie. This is real. Dwayne Johnson, George Stephanopoulos, live unfiltered, unforgiving. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments, because what you're about to witness is one of the most jaw-dropping confrontations ever aired on national TV. Now, let's take you inside the ABC studios and watch the illusion crack. The lights were too bright, even for him. Dwayne Johnson sat quietly in the dressing room at ABC's Good Morning America, sipping from a bottle of water with the calm of a man who's been doing this for decades. His signature charisma hung around him like an aura-effortless, magnetic, almost bulletproof. The makeup team hovered, dusting powder across his forehead, checking for shine, patting down a wrinkle in his shirt that didn't even exist. He nodded, along as his publicist, a petite woman with a tablet in one hand and a phone in the other, rattled off key talking points, the opening weekend numbers, the charitable campaign, the family-friendly angle of the film. They'd done this dance 2,000 times. It was supposed to be easy. What none of them knew, not his publicist, not the producers, not even Dwayne himself, was that just one room over, George Stephanopoulos was sharpening a different script. The veteran journalist sat alone at his desk, glasses low on his nose, a thick binder open in front of him. Not film notes, not fluff questions, receipts, quotes, allegations. Research that had been cross-checked, underlined, and marked in red. He wasn't preparing for a puff-piece interview. He was preparing for an inquisition. When Johnson walked onto the set, the change in atmosphere was immediate. No music, no warm laughter, no handshake worth mentioning. Stephanopoulos remained seated, barely glancing up from his notes. "Good morning, Dwayne," he said flatly. "I trust you're ready for a real conversation today," he added, voice cold, not just another promotional puppet show. Johnson sat slowly, smile still on his face, but his eyes narrowing just slightly. "Good morning, George. I'm always ready for real conversations. That's never been a problem for me." "We'll see about that," Stephanopoulos replied. Flipping a page with theatrical precision, the tension was already audible. The set crew shifted uncomfortably. Camera 3's red light blinked to life. And just like that, millions were watching. "Ladies and gentlemen," George said into the camera, "we're here with Dwayne Johnson." He turned his gaze to his guest. "Dwayne, you've made quite a fortune, playing the hero in countless action films. But I have to ask, when the cameras stop rolling, are you really the good guy you pretend to be?" A beat past, Johnson blinked. This wasn't how these things started, not even close. "George, I'm not sure what you're getting at," he said carefully, "but I've always tried to be authentic with my fans and the public." "Authentic?" George leaned forward, voice low and loaded. "Is it authentic to lecture people about hard work while you're making more money in a month than most Americans see? In a lifetime?" The words landed like punches. Off-screen, Johnson's publicist froze. Crew members exchanged worried glances. "George," Dwayne said, "slower now," voice tinged with a sharpened edge. "I work extremely hard for everything I've achieved. I didn't come from money. I didn't have connections. Every opportunity I've gotten, I earned." Stephanopoulos let out a dry laugh. "Respect for the craft," he said mockingly. "You call making the same muscle-bound action movie over and over again respect for the craft. You've turned acting into a brand. You've turned yourself into a product. And frankly, it's insulting to real actors who actually challenge themselves." Johnson's jaw tightened, his fists clenched in his lap, unseen by the cameras. "I think you're being incredibly disrespectful," he replied. "Not just to me, but to the millions of people who love these films. Entertainment has value. Joy matters. Joy." George scoffed. "Or is it just distraction? Mindless content to keep the public sedated while you and your Hollywood friends rake in billions?" Even the floor director stopped moving. "And let's talk politics," George said, flipping another page. "You've been hinting at a run for office. What qualifies a professional wrestler turned actor to lead the country? Your ability to memorize lines and flex your biceps. Johnson didn't answer right away. The smile was gone now. I've never announced any political run. I've said I care about the people in this country. You care, George snapped. You won't risk your brand. That's not leadership, Dwayne. That's cowardice dressed as diplomacy. Johnson leaned forward, the sheer presence of his body seeming to darken the room. You know what, George? I came here this morning expecting a professional interview. What I got is a personal attack from someone who clearly forgot what journalism is supposed to be. Because I'm actually doing my job. He paused, locking eyes with the camera. The American people deserve to know who you really are. Johnson's voice dropped, calm again. But cold, George. I don't know what your problem is with me, but this has gone way beyond journalism. You're coming at my character based on twisted interpretations of success. Stephanopoulos raised a paper like a dagger. This is from a former stuntman on one of your films. Dwayne talks about treating everyone like family, but when the cameras aren't rolling, he barely acknowledges the crew. It's all for social media. Really, George said, because I have 3 more. I treat everyone with respect, Johnson said, voice now shaking with fury. I remember names. I ask about their families. I make sure people are taken care of. But not when it costs you anything, George sneered. Not when it interferes with the image. I've got testimonials, Dwayne, from multiple sets. Crew members, assistants, drivers, people who say the humble hero doesn't exist unless a lens is pointed at him. Johnson's publicist was now at the edge of the set, whispering to a producer, but no one dared interrupt. Your cherry-picking quotes defeat a narrative. Johnson growled. I don't have a narrative, George said. I have facts. I have sources. And they're tired of watching you cash in on an image that doesn't reflect reality. Johnson stood. The studio shifted. You know what, George? I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Sit down, George ordered. We're live. You walk out, it proves everything I'm saying. Johnson didn't move. I've taken scrutiny my whole career, he said. But this isn't scrutiny. It's a vendetta. George stood too. Their faces were just feet apart now. The only thing personal about this, George said, is my personal commitment to truth. You want truth? Johnson shot back. You're not a journalist. You're a parasite. You don't inform people. You ambush them. Oh, I'm terrified, George said sarcastically. What are you going to do, Dwayne? Throw me through a table? Johnson stared, then whispered, You have no idea what real life is. George smiled cruelly. What have you won, Dwayne? Teen Choice Awards, MTV popcorn statues. I've won Emmys, Peabodys. I've interviewed world leaders when I entertain people, Johnson said. I make them feel better about themselves. You tear people down to feel powerful. I am powerful, George hissed, stepping out from behind the desk. You serve your wallet. I serve the public. You think I've taken advantage of people? Johnson asked, stepping back to restrain himself. You think I've sold them lies? I think, George said, pulling out his phone, we should talk about your crypto endorsements. Or maybe your tequila company. Or at the time you told fans to invest in a company that collapsed 3 months later. It's not slander, George said. It's the truth. You've spent years perfecting the brand, but underneath, there's no character to assassinate. Johnson was still, breathing deeply. You win, George, he said softly. You got what you wanted. You broke through. He began to unclip his microphone. George's voice cracked slightly, but he covered it with another jab. I'm not trying to win. Johnson set the mic down gently. No, he said. You're trying to humiliate. He turned to leave. You can't walk away, George shouted. You have obligations, promotions, contracts. Johnson paused. At the door, turned back once, calmly. Watch me. And just like that, the most famous man in the world disappeared off screen. Stephanopoulos stood frozen, for once looking small. The silence was deafening, and America held its breath. The door shut behind him with a dull, final thud. And just like that, Dwayne Johnson was gone. Not the character, not the brand, the man, the myth, the people's champion. Gone. George Stephanopoulos stood center frame, papers still in hand, eyes blank. For a long, breathless moment, the studio was dead silent crew members, frozen behind their cameras, the control room crackling in his earpiece. Producers whispering frantic instructions he didn't even hear. His voice, when it finally came, was brittle, forced. "Well," he muttered, looking directly into the camera, "I guess we've seen the real Dwayne Johnson today, folks." It was supposed to be triumphant, but even he could hear it didn't land. Across America, living rooms and break rooms and cell phones buzzed with disbelief. What was supposed to be a morning fluff piece had just turned into the single most uncomfortable live interview in recent TV history. And yet, it wasn't over. A door creaked off camera. Footsteps. The Rock was back slow, deliberate, each step echoing like thunder against polished floors. Johnson returned not to take a seat, not to offer apologies, but to reclaim something else entirely. He stood over Stephanopoulos, shoulders square, eyes dark and steady. The entire studio leaned forward. "You know why I came back?" he asked, voice calm, controlled, terrifying in its quiet conviction. "Because I realized walking away would give you exactly what you wanted." Stephanopoulos blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not here for you, George," Johnson interrupted. "I'm here for the people watching at home, the ones who think they know me, the ones you just tried to turn against me with out-of-context quotes, cheap shots, and outright lies." George raised a defensive hand. "Everything I brought up was an ambush," Johnson cut in again. "You came at me with every dirty trick in the book, and you call it journalism. But let's be real, you weren't trying to inform the public, you were trying to humiliate me." His voice dropped again, a dangerous calm returning, and maybe that says more about you than it does about me. The studio was dead silent. Stephanopoulos glanced toward the producers for backup, but none came. Dwayne walked to the edge of the stage and turned to face the camera directly. His back was now to George. "Let me tell you something," he said, addressing the viewers now. "I've made mistakes. I've taken risks. I've endorsed things that didn't always work out. That's true. I'm not perfect. Never said I was." His chest rose with emotion. "But what I am is someone who came from nothing, who got knocked down more times than most people could count. Someone who kept getting back up, not because it was good for my image, but because that's what I believe in." He paused. Let the silence breathe. "You can call me a brand. You can call me a product, but I'll tell you this. Every single person I've met, on every film set, in every gym, at every fan event, they know exactly who I am, because I show up, I shake hands, I ask questions, I remember names. I stay long after the cameras stop rolling, because I care." His voice cracked slightly. "Not weakness, rawness. I care more than you could ever understand, George. And if that's not enough for you, if you'd rather dig through dirt looking for something ugly to broadcast to the world, then maybe the problem isn't who you're interviewing. Maybe it's you." George let out a shaky breath. "Are you done?" Johnson turned back, slowly, almost. He took a step closer, now standing directly in front of the desk again. "I don't owe you a confession. I don't owe you an apology, but I do owe the people watching the truth." He pointed to the camera. "I've worked my whole life, too. Build something that means something. Not just movies, not just brands. Moments, stories, smiles. That kid who sees a guy like me and believes he can make it too." His hand dropped. "If you think that's meaningless, George, then maybe you've forgotten who journalism is supposed to be for." George tried to regain control. "We ask hard questions so the public then ask them with respect," Dwayne snapped. "Ask them with integrity. Don't dress up bitterness as bravery." Now it was Stephanopoulos, whose composure wavered. He leaned back slightly, shrinking, if only for a moment. "Why did you come back? Really?" he asked quietly. Johnson paused. His eyes softened, just a little. "Because my daughter watches this show, and I'll be damned if the version of me you tried to create is the one she remembers." The crew gasped softly, and for once, Stephanopoulos had no comeback. The control room whispered frantic instructions cut to commercial. "Fade out, salvage this disaster," but no one moved, because something real was happening. And for once, in morning TV, real was more powerful than ratings. Stephanopoulos adjusted his tie. It trembled. I didn't mean to cross a line," he said, his voice quieter now. "It wasn't personal." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "It wasn't." George's voice broke. "I used to believe in what this job meant, but now it's all clicks and trends and staying relevant. And watching someone like Uzo composed, so bulletproof, I I guess I'd let that get to me. Dwayne didn't speak. He didn't need to, because in that moment, it was clear to everyone watching across TVs, phones, and social media feeds that the confrontation had shifted. This wasn't just about ego or headlines anymore. This was about two men, both built by public attention, finally stripped of all performance. "You're right," George said at last. "I lost the plot today, and somehow it hurt more than if he'd shouted. I was trying to matter in a world that's moving on without people like me." Dwayne stepped forward again, not as an opponent, but as something quieter, sadder. "George," he said, "if you'd just asked me real questions from a real place, we could have had the best interview of your career." "A beat," I would have answered. George closed his eyes briefly. The camera slowly zoomed in on Dwayne's face strong. Still, but softened now by the toll of it all. He turned back to the audience one final time. "Not everything you read is the truth. Not every headline tells the whole story. But when you show up every day with honesty, with kindness, with respect, that's what matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He nodded once, calmly, and this time when he walked off set, he didn't storm, he didn't flinch, he just left. With dignity, the doors closed behind him again. But this time the silence wasn't empty, it was full. Back in the studio, George looked directly at the camera, and for the first time in a long time, his eyes were wet. "I have no closing statement," he said. "I think the moment already." It spoke louder than I ever could. Then, quietly, the feed cut to black. Across the nation, millions sat in stunned silence. A confrontation that began as a media bloodbath had turned into something more intimate, more tragic, more real. The fall of the armor, the collapse of image, the rise of honesty, and in a world obsessed with perfection, for one fleeting moment, imperfection stole the show. If this moved you, if you saw something real in today's confrontation, hit that subscribe button. Share your thoughts in the comments, because no matter which side you're on, one thing's certain: what happened on that stage will be remembered for years to come. This wasn't just television. This was truth, and truth never needs a second take. Let me know if you'd like a thumbnail concept, title ideas, or a trailer script for this dramatic confrontation.